Hey guys, Steve Trevino here, and thank you for joining us on another podcast of Steve and Captain Evil. Obviously, today it's just Steve, but we do have a very special guest. Somebody, well, first of all, let me go back and thank our sponsors, Aztec Chevrolet. Love you guys. Thank you so much. Give those guys a chance. Old Salt Coffee. If you're drinking coffee, just order it. Have it sent to the house. Veteran-owned and operated company, Old Salt Coffee. And you should be listening to this podcast on picked cherries. So download the app for us. So sorry, I'm a little bit everywhere, guys, and I apologize for that. It is just me today, and it has been a very, very rough week for the Trevinos. I know we announced that Daddy Raymond's cancer had gone into remission and that we were safe. Last week, it is not in remission, and it's now found its way into his brain and his spinal cord. So right now, as we speak, Renae is at MD Anderson trying to get answers with her father. Her sister came in from Japan and her brother, and they're trying to figure out what the plan of attack is and what's going to happen. So that's why Renae isn't here. Now, coincidentally, Renae and I were supposed to be doing an interview with a fellow comedian named Maz Jobrani, and it worked out that since Renae's not here, well, today Maz is going to be my co-host. We have a very interesting conversation about kids, about life, about touring, about just a little bit of everything. And coincidentally, Maz and I we found that we have very similar paths, that we are very the same. I will tell you that, Maz, I can't say it enough. Maz, if you ever hear me not say anything at all, it's because I have nothing nice to say. That's why. So, but when I have something nice to say, I like to share it. I like to talk about it. I like to let that person know that I do admire them, that I do think they're great, because Maz is a little older than me. He got to the Comedy Store before I did. And he was one of those people that was always very genuine, which is hard to find, especially in that town. He was always very kind to me, always had a moment to chat with me and to talk comedy. I admired his comedy because it was very down to earth, very conversational. He's very, very good at what he does. And they reached out and said, hey, Maz would like to be on the Steve and Captain Evil podcast. So, man, we were all about it, and I'm so happy to share him with you. If you don't know who Maz Jobrani is, man, go ahead and look him up. The guy has 7 specials, from Amazon Prime to Peacock TV to Netflix, and he, like myself, decided to go directly to YouTube. So his new specials on YouTube, I want you to know that me and him are very similar when it comes to our approach with stand-up, yet very different. And man, I'm recording this after I already chatted with him, so it was so cool to catch up with him. And I was asking him questions that when you're at the Comedy Store, you really can't ask those questions. You really can't ask somebody, hey, tell me about your life at the Comedy Store. So it gave me an opportunity to learn a little bit more about Maz. I think he drops some wonderful wisdom. I think that he is a very, very smart individual. I considered him a big brother type back then. And because he has older kids and he is older, after this conversation, I still consider him a big brother type. So, amazing comedian. I thought it was a wonderful conversation. We're all going to miss Renae. We're all going to miss Captain Evil today. I miss her desperately. She's been out of the house for several days now, and it has been me and the kids going at it alone. And we miss mom. The kids miss mom. I miss my wife. but we're going to do what we have to do. And we all miss her. Feel free to send her a message to let her know that you're thinking about her. But I hope you enjoyed this conversation with me and Maz. I enjoyed it. And we appreciate you guys continuing to watch and love us and care about us. Here's me and Maz Jobrani.
Steve,
Is that Mr. Jobrani? How are you, sir?
good buddy. How you doing?
I love it, man. I'm doing great. I'm lying to you. We have my wife is normally my co-host, but my father-in-law has had survived cancer, and now it's back in his brain and his spinal cord. So,
Oh man, I'm so
man,
sorry to hear that.
yeah, she's over there in MD Anderson trying to get everything sorted out. So it's me and you solo today. I hope you don't mind. I know it's better to have a pretty face, but it kind of worked out that you were our guest because you can be my co-host today.
Yeah, I'll be your co-host. And again, I'm sorry to hear that, man. I've had cancer in my family. I know it's hard, and just sending you guys my thoughts on all that, man.
Man, I appreciate you, dude. Well, let's get into it. And then, as you know, producer Rick is on at the moment. And then after we're done, leave the computer open, let it download so that we can get the stuff. You know the deal. So,
Cool. Are
um,
you guys in Houston? Where are you located?
I'm south of Austin, Texas, in New Braunfels. Yeah. But we'll jump right into it. I'm gonna pre-record a intro, so we'll just get into it. But I am so happy that you reached out. There are, if I'm being honest, and we like to be honest on the podcast, there are people that I just didn't like in the in the comedy scene. Nothing against them. I just never. I never really. I was just a different person, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
When it came to, I wanted a wife, I wanted kids, I wanted a
yeah.
very normal life, and I remember you were ahead of me. So I remember when you were talking about being married and the kids, and I just want to know how have you made it work through your career?
Well, yeah, man. People ask that all the time in terms of people that aren't in the business. They go, "How do you go on the road and come back and be with the kids?" So and your wife. So I think there's a couple things. One thing that I learned early on, I used to do, it's always this balance, whether it's us or it's not, even if you're not in the business. I remember I heard Mark McGuire, for those people who don't know, Mark McGuire, the famous baseball player, he was on the Oakland A's uh, and in his first marriage. And he said that he regretted being so um, engulfed in his career because he said he felt like he missed the youth of his kids when he was on the A's. And he said when he later on in life, he realized, I want to also experience my kids as they grow up. And anyone who's got kids knows it goes fast. You want to be present as much as you can. And also, with your wife, I mean, you want to, that's where like date nights and all that stuff comes in. You gotta make the time. So early on in my career, what I would do is I would always have Sunday. I would add a Sunday night show if I were doing a weekend at a club, like say Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I'd try and add a Sunday and make it for 14 and older, so people could bring their kids. And then I lost my brother to addiction in 2014, and I remember being at his funeral, and it hit me like life is short. And I thought, you know what? When I don't come home on Sunday, I'm basically missing the whole weekend. So from then, I started to make sure that if I was going out of town, I would either do Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and take the latest flight out on Thursday. I mean, I'm sorry, the earliest flight on Thursday, so I don't miss, so I could be home as much as I could, and then be back on the earliest flight Sunday. So there's a lot of times where I'm landing exhausted from the night before, but I'm like, I gotta run, and then I try to be, as present as possible with my kids and my wife and my
But
family.
but
So
kind of going back to, and I have those moments in my life where there's things that happen, and I think there's two kinds of people. There's the kinds of people that somebody like close to you, like your brother, passes, and you go, well, man, life sucks, and that sucks, and whatever. Or there's the kind of person that I like to say that I am, and it seems like that you are, that you go, hey, I'm going to reflect on this moment, and take a moment to kind of go, hey man, what is life all about? You know, and then adjust from the lesson learned, if you will.
Well, I think you can have a little bit of both because I also would be lying if I were to say that I don't think like wow life sucks because I lost my brother there, I lost my sister to breast cancer later, and then now we're getting at that age, Steve, where we're losing more and more people. I just was at a memorial for another gentleman I knew who was 69. That's not old. I mean, it's not that old. I mean, it's older, but it's not. It was sudden the way it came on. We both know David Arnold, our friend David Arnold, who passed away. I mean, you just don't know, right? So on the one hand, I sit there and I go, like I spoke at this friend's memorial, and I said, you know, you're also thinking, what there's got to be like it makes me every time somebody good or close dies, I lose my faith in religion more. I'm like, they can't be like there is no God because there's a lot of really bad people that are living to an older age, and meanwhile we've got these beautiful people that are passing away. And so on the one hand I go life sucks, but on the other hand I go what you just said, I go, well, what am I going to do about this? What I'm going to do is I'm going to try and be present more. I'm going to try and engage more. I'm going to try and spend more time with friends, family, do stuff that I want to do. You know, I got into comedy late in life. I got into comedy at 26. And it took me. My parents kind of didn't want me to do this because of the immigrant background, but it took me till 26 to realize you live once. You got to do what you want to do. And so there's a lot of stuff that you and I still want to do. Probably like one of those for me is like playing a musical instrument, and I keep putting it off. And I'm like, well, I'll be on my deathbed going, I never did it, so I got to do it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You know. So you take the lessons you can. But you also can be angry and upset about the idea of life is not fair, I think.
Well, I mean, but that's what I also, and you know, I always, like I said, you were at the Comedy Store before me, and you were one of those guys that I always admired your very smooth approach to comedy, and your very, what's the word? It's a very honest portrayal of who you are, and I don't know. Now that you told me you started at 26, do you think that? I mean, of course, it's a blessing and a curse, but do you think that led to your style? That you were a little older, and at that time, were you already married? Were you already dating your wife? Where were you?
I met my wife shortly after I started stand-up comedy. Yeah, you know, they say that your brain develops by your mid-20s. So it's possible I was a little more mature and I'd seen a little bit more, and but also I think for me, like, I don't consider myself a joke writer, although I love to sit in the back and, you know, if I come up with a tag or something for a comedian, offer it, or if I'm in a writer, you know, if we're messing around with comedians, you try to be funny, and that's basically joke writing. Or I do this like NPR show called Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, where we make fun of the week's news, or anytime I'm a panelist on something, that's joke writing. But I don't feel like that was my strength coming into it. My strength was performing and being on stage, and then realizing, oh, the best way for me to write, I mean, everyone finds their own way, but the best way for me to write is to talk about my life. And that's why I've been able to have, like, I just put out my 7th special. Does that mean I'm a prolific writer? No, it just means that my life changes and material comes my way as my life changes. Now, a lot of the themes are the same, you know, growing up an immigrant, parenting, some of my politics, all of that stuff. If you look at the material, you'll be like, oh, there's a lot of similar themes. But I think I learned, like, you know, I love watching when you hear anybody tell a personal story and you sit there and you go, oh, wow, that's great. You know, like I remember I watched Brent Morin. I don't really, nowadays, when we're at comedy shows, we don't really, you know, we don't sit in the back and watch the other comedians as much. We're always like out talking. But I happened to be in the main room and Brent Morin was doing some bit about his brother, who I think he's talked about how his brother is gay, and he had all this material about it, and it was very endearing and funny at the same time. And again, I don't know Brent that well. I just know him from the comedy clubs, but I had to go take him aside and go, dude, that was fantastic. Like, I just love that, you know?
Well, that's what I loved about you. I always felt very it was a very soothing, comfortable experience when you were on stage, and with laugh out loud moments. But you always gave me a little perspective as being, again, and I'm not saying that we're that much older, but you were a little older than me, and I was watching you like, oh, and because I always wanted to have a family, I always wanted to be married, and I did fall in love with my wife, and I would watch you and go, oh wow, man, that must be really cool. Because when we were hanging out at the Comedy Store, your kids were very little, and
Yeah.
you were getting into the minivan stories and the all that great stuff, and like you said, the material evolves, and our podcast that we do here in my wife is really about the relationship between husband and wife. So how does your wife, well, first of all, is your wife in the business, and how did you guys meet?
No, my wife's not in the business at all. My wife is actually, she was, so I first met her when I was first starting out. And at the time, I had a day job at an advertising agency, and she was working at a high-end law firm in Los Angeles. She had just moved to LA from New York, and one of my best friends worked at that law firm, and it was my birthday. And he said, oh, a girl's coming from my law firm to join us. And he wasn't trying to set us up because I just gotten out of a 4-year relationship. So he knew I wasn't looking for anybody, and he didn't know her well enough to be.
Well, let's go back to that. So 4 years, and then it just ends. Was there?
Yeah, so I was in this relationship with this other girl for 4 years, and I was in my younger 20s, and it was one of those things where it was like a lot of like there was a lot of lust probably, and there was a lot of, I will say, it was young, and it was like listen, if I were more mature and she were more mature, the previous relationship, we probably would have gotten together and been like, look, this is up and down, let's just separate, but there was a lot of like, oh, I love you, and then like I can't stand you, and then I love you, and so it was a little bit like that, a little tumultuous, but
4 years
that was early 20s.
4 years is a long time.
It is a long time. It is a long time, and that's why when I got out of it, I thought, oh, okay, this is it. I'm gonna live the bachelor life for a little bit, and that lasted 3 months. Because I always say you meet the person when you least expect it. So I was at my birthday, and in LA, and I didn't expect this beautiful woman to walk into my life, and she's beautiful physically. She's this Indian woman, and I love like the exotic look. And she came over and started talking to my friend, and I'm like, "Is that the girl?" And it was, and then she had a great sense of humor because we were in a booth at some like hot nightclub that we had to get in like early to get the seats, like me and my buddies. Because with guys you can't all just get in, so we got like dinner reservations. Like we showed up when the staff was showing up.
Right.
Anyway, she was sitting across, diagonally across, and I was joking, and she's from India originally, and I jokingly, I was a little drunk. I go, "Oh, are you Indian?" Like woo woo woo, or Indian like dot, and she kind of laughed and she said, "Yeah, I'm Indian." Woo woo woo, and then she turned to my friend and she goes, "What an effing moron!" And my friend goes, "Dude, she just called you." Yeah, and my friend goes, "Dude, she just called you a moron." And I go, "Oh my God, she's got a sense of humor." And I high-fived her and then started talking to her. And I'm like, wow, she's funny, she's smart. And then we just, like that night, I was like, I was saying I'd intended to be living this bachelor life, but all of a sudden in my mind, I was like, I want to go on a date with this girl. So I told her, I said, let's go to dinner sometime and all that. So we hit it off there, but she's someone who is not at all, she doesn't like it. The irony of it is that I don't have like matinee idol looks. Like I don't have the front of the camera looks. I have behind the camera looks. She's got front of the camera looks. She's a beautiful woman, but she hates being in front of the camera, and I love being in front of the camera. So whatever the difference is, it is. And so she's not in this world at all. So that's how.
But that makes a lot of sense because I've always felt like I had, like I said, I had a hard time in Hollywood, and people felt very Hollywood. You never did.
Yeah.
You never did.
Yeah.
And I guess you would attribute that probably to her, maybe?
I would attribute it to maybe a little more, like you were saying earlier, maybe getting into the business later in life and being a little more mature than like if I were maybe in my teens and gotten in and felt that pressure. I mean, we all feel the pressure of, especially nowadays with social media and how many views do you have and the algorithms and all that crap. But in terms of just like being a human being, I think like a lot of times I just go, there's no, people go, you're very nice. I go, there's no reason not to be nice. First of all, I'm doing what I love doing. I mean, I really had to battle to get to this with my parents. Like my parents really were, they weren't, dictators, but they were definitely traditional, not religious, but traditional in that they'd come from Iran. They brought us from Iran. I left when I was 6, and we grew up in America. And in their minds, especially back then, it was like, okay, you get a job, lawyer, doctor, engineer, something like that, and and you have a secure life, and that was it. And so, from the age of 12, when I first was a fan of Eddie Murphy's, and I got on stage and I did a play, and the director said, "You've got what it takes." From then on, I was like, I want to do this. And then every time I came upon another teacher or director, they'd be like, "You've got what it takes." And my parents would show up at the shows, and I remember one time the director was like, "Your son could really do this." And my dad, "Oh, thank you very much." And then we get in the car, my dad's like, "That bitch is crazy. Like, don't listen to her." So,
Maz, excuse me for 1 second. It's my wife, and as you know the situation.
oh yeah, of course, yeah, of course,
Hello?
yeah.
Hey, baby, I'm on with Maz, baby. Everything okay? Okay, right back. Okay. Thank goodness. Everything's okay.
Good, good.
And Maz, it's so funny you say that because, I have immigrant parents as well. But my father is a Vietnam veteran, tough guy, like a real tough guy. And man, when I would invite him, like, Dad, I'm doing the Follies. And he's like, oh, my son, what? Yeah, my only son wants to wear makeup and
Yeah,
go on stage,
yeah.
and
Yeah, what are you, a
yeah,
fruitcake? That's how
but that is something else that we have to overcome.
Yeah, so when in overcoming that, that's where like once I overcome that in my mind, and it's not just my parents, because my parents I almost feel like played the whole community against me. Meaning what? Like when I first started doing stand up, there was no one else from my background doing it. That doesn't mean I was some groundbreaker. It just means generationally I was in that middle place where I saw this way of doing things that was different than everyone else. And I wanted to do it differently. I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to be the Jackie Robinson of this. It was more like, no, I just want to do it. I wasn't even thinking about that. But at that time, my mom would like talk about, telling her friends like, oh, convince him he's lost his mind. So I felt like the whole community, and also the Persian community, and I don't know how the Mexican community is, but it's like it feels like they used to say like, we have a name in the community, don't ruin our name. So somewhere in the back of my mind, I felt like I was being judged always. I had to live up to some standard that everyone was trying to live up to. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, when you grow up, you realize behind closed doors, everyone's just got a lot of effed up shit going on. But period. But at that point, so once I rebelled and did what I wanted to do, I felt free. And then it took me a while to be able to feel like I could curse on stage. I didn't want to curse because I was like, I'd been taught that like, if you're, well-behaved person doesn't curse. And then I remember specifically one night my friends, one of my good friends' moms, who was around the age of my mom, came to the Comedy Store with her friends to watch a show, and I'd forgotten she was in the audience, and I did a couple of, cursed a couple of times. And then I remember she was there. I was like, oh my God, my friend's mom is here. I'm so sorry I cursed. I didn't mean to. Here I am, a grown man, apologizing. And it was, but then I realized, and she was laughing. She didn't care. And I realized, you know what? Nobody cares. Just do you. This is like, there's a lot worse stuff in the world than saying a bad word. And so having done that, now I feel like anytime anything comes up or somebody like now if a troll comes on and goes, oh, you're this, that, you shouldn't say this or that. I'm like, I have to deal with the biggest obstacle ever. So you're nothing to me. Like I'm not even worried about this. And then you go ahead.
No, I was saying it's just crazy how similar, me and you are, because same as you. Well, I just wanted to do stand up. I had no idea that when I started stand up, there was no famous Mexican American comics. I mean, we had one, Paul Rodriguez, wonderful comedian, nice guy.
Yeah.
He wasn't even that famous. But
Yeah.
I also think that ignorance is bliss because, had I had this brain, I don't know if I would have started, because if I would have known all the obstacles that we have to overcome, but like you said, there's something to I just want to do stand up. It's what I
Yeah.
want
I
to
just
do.
want to, yeah. And you feel like, if enough people tell you, no, being able to defy those people is it's a big moment in your life. Just to do it. Now, the success part of it is a separate thing. That's icing on the cake, because now those same people that in my mind were saying no are fans, and they're like, oh, this is great. And there's more and more people doing it, which is a great thing. And I don't even know if in their minds they thought they were saying no. In their minds, they were trying to tell you what they thought was the right thing to do. But that's like with my kids now, I encourage them. I'm like, just do whatever you want. I don't care what you do. Just do something. Like I was talking about, my kids are teenagers now. My wife, we're talking about them growing up. And I think a big thing in life is finding a purpose. You have to find a purpose. And I've always said find a passion, but it's not even about your passion. It's about a purpose. That purpose might be something that you didn't even know was something you could do. So it could be helping others. It could be entrepreneurial. It could be whatever it is. If you've got a purpose where you're like waking up and going, I got to go do this. So for us, no matter what our day had, we always knew that night we were going to go do 10 minutes at some bar or restaurant or whatever. So we looked forward to that the whole day.
Yeah.
And then when we got there, it was like, oh, I did.
Well, it's funny, Maz, that you say that, because I recently had a conversation with a mutual friend of ours, and I will not divulge that name because I don't like talking about comics, But that particular comic called me up and he said, Steve, I'm going into rehab. He goes, and, I just wanted to tell you, man, I just want what you have. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, man, you got a wife, you got kids, man, I just want that. And it goes back to what you were saying about purpose, right? He's going to rehab because the only purpose he has is stand-up. The only thing he loves is stand-up. And when the stand-up's over, as you know, we're in a hotel room by ourselves. Yeah. And it gets really lonely, right? And if you're a single guy, then you hook up with some dumb girl, and then now you're even more lonely because you're like, oh God, what did I do, right? But for me and you, my purpose is I want to be a great stand-up comedian. Now I wanted to provide for my family, and I got to get back home. Yeah. I got to get back home and be the best dad I can be, the best husband I can be, the best present person I can be. And that purpose does matter, because it does, because I was a heavy drinker. I was a partier. I was a mess. And had I not fallen in love with my wife to give me that purpose, I'd probably be checking into rehab as well. Yeah, listen, dude, it's easy. We're surrounded by alcohol all the time. We're surrounded by drugs all the time. There's even times like this past weekend I did the Raleigh Improv, and I've never considered myself an alcoholic of any sort. Like my father was a functioning alcoholic. I am someone who, if I drink like 3 or 4 nights in a row, I go, uh-oh, and I just kind of stop. And again, when I drink, it's not like blackout drink. It's like 2 or 3 drinks, and then I'm like, it's too much. Also, by the way, I'm a little vain as I'm getting older. I'm like, I see the belly. I'm like, oh God, yeah, and all the wrinkles. So, but even then, like this past weekend, I was to the Raleigh Improv, and my opening act, Tehran, doesn't drink at all, and I wasn't drinking Friday, Saturday. I wasn't going to drink, but as I'm on stage doing my second show, I look in the audience and I kind of saw beer, and it was hot on stage. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to get beer afterwards. And I had 1 beer at the end after the show Friday, and I ended up having 2 beers at the end of the show Saturday because that was the end of the weekend. But my point is, we're surrounded by it. It's there. And that for me, that was like simple. That's not a big deal. But if you're someone who's got that gene, and like you said, is looking to party, it's right there. And so it's easy to fall into that. And by the way, families aren't for everybody, but other things of purpose or other ways of putting your energies towards other things can be, whether that's working with a charity or like art or whatever you're doing that helps you focus your mind away from all the negative stuff that's there. But families are great. And I always said, like, I would go on an audition, and if all you have going on that day is the audition, then you're just going to obsess about the audition. But if you have to, like, as soon as you're done with the audition, you got to jump in the car, go pick up your kid, take him to soccer practice, and then go there, here, there, whatever. You're done with the audition. You forget about it. You're like, I'm busy with other stuff. And
The other thing is, I watched this clip that was going viral. This guy asked the Dalai Lama. He goes, there's a lot of mental health issues, and a lot of kids nowadays are suffering with depression and all the other stuff. And what would you say to them? And he said, I would encourage them to try and be altruistic. He goes, I'm the Dalai Lama, but I don't think of myself as the Dalai Lama because I'm too busy helping and thinking about others. This is before he did the tongue with the kid.
Yeah, before he went all Bill Cosby on us.
Yeah. But yeah, if you have other things to focus on besides your career, whether you're an attorney or a truck driver or a comedian, I don't care what it is, but we can all get obsessed with our work and everything going on in our work. That's why it's great to have other things driving you that bring you peace, or give you other purpose, whether it's your kids or it's some sort of exercise or it's whatever. So I think that the way your family helped you, it definitely has helped me as well.
Well, and I always talk about, and it sounds like your wife is very similar to mine. My wife has high standards and my wife has high expectations, and there is no getting off the road and, hey, leave me alone, I'm taking a nap. My wife's like, no. I've got activities. We got this for the kids. And there is no, I can't come in and mail it in because she's like,
no,
hey, we got things to do. We raised our kids a certain way. No tablet time. We got this. We got the children's museum. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, let's go. And because of those high standards, Saturday night, people are like, you want to drink? I'm like, dude, I can't.
Yeah.
There's no way I can drink, wake up at 3 a.m. It's already 1 a.m., be on the first flight out, get to my wife and kids, and function at the level that I expect myself to function at, then the level that my wife expects me to function at. I can't drink. I got to go. And even though, as you know, I don't think there's a better energy than killing in front of your audience, the energy that's coming at you, the love that we get, and you are so beloved, Maz. And I don't know if you know that. When I go to a club after you, the staff is on cloud nine. Oh my God, Maz was here. His people are the best. He's the best. He treats us great. So you're so beloved. And when you're beloved like that, it's hard to come down and it's hard to shut it down.
Yeah, no, I first of all, thank you for the kind words, but you're right. It's you do, like, it's interesting because I was trying to explain to somebody, being a stand-up comedian is like having a movie come out every weekend. And what I mean by that is you go to a town, you kill, and you're like, oh my God, we sold great tickets. We sold out. Fantastic. As soon as you land Monday, you're getting a ticket report for the upcoming town. And they're like, you've only sold 10 tickets. You're like, what? How could I sell, 2,000 here and I'm only sold 10 there? Well, your demographics, whatever. And it's like, oh my God.
Here we go again.
Here we go again. And because of that, like, you think like, oh, it would be great to go celebrate every time you have a win, but sometimes you don't have that time, like you were saying. Like I try, if I have a show that's like a big show, I try to see if I can, organize some kind of celebration around it. So like I'll do DC, that's one of my biggest shows. I'll encourage my wife to come out with me, make a weekend out of it, and we have a good time, But other times, as you said, you might have a great weekend, and you, exactly like you just said, it's like, well, I can't go party every time I have a great weekend, or every time I finish a weekend, whether it's great or not. And I need to focus, like you said, to show up, be present, and look, it's a good thing. It can be exhausting, but it's a good thing. And also, by the way, it's great for material for us. It's like, being like the exhausted husband and all that. And,
well, I always say that if I'm not living life, then I have nothing to talk about. Right.
Exactly. Exactly.
If I'm in my room, and which again, and I hate to harp on this, but watching you as I was coming up, and I'm sitting there going, why is he so different? You were talking about your family, your wife, you feeling like you're getting older, being competitive. I mean, I remember all the things, and I'm sitting there going, why is this guy different when everybody else was? And no offense to that kind of comedy, it's needed, and gosh, our friends are some of the biggest, most brilliant comedians in the world. However, like I said, you just had, for me, a very down to earth, very almost middle America. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Northern California in the Bay Area, and I think part of it is, Steve, the more we talk about our lives, the more we realize how much everyone's got in common. So I've now had a chance, and I'm sure you have as well, to tour around the world, because comedy now is worldwide. It's no longer just the 50 states. It's you can go all over the world. And if you do a joke about your kids in Sweden or in Saudi Arabia or in Australia or in Singapore, you're going to get the same laughs from people because they are going through the same thing as you. Now, of course, if I'm doing the jokes about my kids in front of a bunch of 17-year-olds, they might look at me and be like, what are you talking about, old man?
Right.
So that's a demographic thing. But even then you could relate, you know, even then I've done shows in front of 17-year-olds and I've like related it to either their younger siblings or to them and said, you guys have grown up in this generation and just had fun with them. So really, I think the more you talk about your life, and the more people realize it's a sincere thing, you know, I'm not making it up. Maybe I'm exaggerating the truth to make it funnier. But I honestly think that's what it is. I think, you know, and again, every time I see somebody, remember Freddie Soto, who I know was someone that we both looked up to, you know, when he would talk about his dad and all the misunderstandings and all, I mean, it's just like, I just sit in the back. I'll be like, geez, this is so funny. And it reminds me of my dad. And I wish I would have delved into what he delved into to find this gold, you know, and that's kind of what we aspire to.
But I feel like you are going in that direction. And you know, I've seen several of your specials and I do got to tell you, man, when I'm in and this is meant to be racist, but you know, when I'm in an Uber and somebody says, "Oh, you're a comedian," and I go, "Yeah," the first thing that comes out of their mouth is, "Oh, you know Maz Jobrani?" And I'm like, "Yes, I do know him."
Yeah.
But does it feel good to almost represent an entire culture?
Well, it's funny you say that. First of all, I always tell people I'll either get a call or a text from people either when they're in an Uber or they're at a doctor's office. So that's my demographic. I got doctors and Uber drivers. And a lot of those Uber drivers were engineers back home, and now they're driving Ubers. But I tried to early on say I don't want to represent anybody. Like, I'm representing me. And the reason I said that was because I didn't want to disappoint anybody. Because I come from Iran. It's a Muslim country, but I'm not religious. Early on in my act, I would talk about discrimination against Muslims. I still talk about discrimination against Muslims or discrimination against anybody. If I see discrimination, I want to talk about it. But the Muslim stuff was hit home a little more because since we came to America in the early, you know, as soon as I arrived, a year later, there was a hostage crisis. They used to call us F and Iranian. So stuff that I had to deal with. And so, but then I realized, you know, I'm also somebody who I'm not really religious. So I don't pray 5 times a day. I don't fast during Ramadan. I drink alcohol. I eat pork, all that stuff. So I was like, I don't want to pretend to be Muslim and then be drinking and have somebody reach out and go, you're not a good Muslim or whatever. Or I don't want to, like, there was times where I would stand up for my friends in the LGBTQ community and I would get people on social media that were from a Muslim or Christian or religious background going like, oh, this is disgusting. And I'm going, well, then I don't represent you because I'm very different. So I tried early on to say, I don't want to represent anybody. I just want to represent me. Just last year, there was the protests in Iran when they killed this young girl named Mahsa Amini. She was this 22-year-old girl whose hair was out of her hijab. The police arrested her and then killed her, and there was protests. And again, within the Iranian community, there was people that were fighting each other because we were all against the Islamic regime because it's an autocratic government. But there was people in the diaspora who thought that they should be dealt with differently, and all of a sudden people were like, you're a leftist, you're a rightist, and people were arguing and all that. And I was like, you know what, I can't sit here and try and argue with these people. I'm just going to do me. And really my social media at that point just became like an activist social media. I was just trying to talk about it as much as I could to try and help get the news into the American news. Maz,
I admire you for that, you know, and me personally, I don't do politics. I don't get out into the politics. My cause is veterans. I take care of veterans. That's what I do. And I remember when all this was going down, as a matter of fact, because I have so many fans from the East and from India and from Iraq and Iran, and and I love them all, and we get wonderful messages from them for me and my wife all the time. And people were asking me, please get involved, and I just chose not to,
Yeah.
and I would always say, man, I support my buddy Maz, and that was kind of my way of saying, hey, I love what Maz is saying over there, and he's my friend, and so I admire you for that. Now, the last bit that I would like to ask you, because you are like a big brother, and this podcast is all about couples and raising kids and the things that we go through in our relationships. I will start off by telling a story. Me going on the road has become harder with my kids. My son is now 7 years old. My daughter's 2.5, and my daughter really doesn't know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
She wakes up one day, daddy's home. She wakes up another day, where did daddy go? But he'll be back, right?
Mm-hmm.
My son has now become very, very aware.
Mm-hmm.
My son is like, can I see the calendar? When are you gone? I need to know. And Maz, it has become so very hard for me. It's a two-part question, I guess. Is number one, how do you cope inside and handle it? And then number two, what can I expect? Because your kids are older than mine as we move forward with this life and this career that we have.
The way I cope is I drink, and then your kids are gonna be in rehab. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
No, again, I go back to what I said in the beginning. I think if you're able to, hopefully, if you're able to, maybe be out of town one weekend, be in town the next, out of town, in town, take off certain periods of the year when they're around for breaks. Like, so for a while, what I was doing was I was able to go, tour basically, let's say end of January to about June. And again, one weekend on, one weekend off. And then the summer would hit, and I would try and find places we could go that we could go together. So I took them to the Montreal Comedy Festival, I think twice. And when we went, we did the shows so that we were there for like 3 weeks. And so for 3 weeks, we were at a hotel. They'd come backstage. I have pictures of them like hanging out with like Eric Griffin and Angelo Sarukis and all these guys. They'd come with me. My wife.
No, I do the same. Now, the thing that I do want to ask about what you're saying is, man, I get anxiety when I miss a week. I start getting this anxiety of like, my career is going to end. They're going to forget about me. I'm
When you miss a week on the road, you mean?
Yeah. Like if I'm not working, I go, oh my gosh. And I do miss,
listen,
I'll miss Halloween. I'll miss Easter week, right? Stuff, 4th of July, stuff like that. But there's something inside of me that gets this crazy anxiety.
Well, listen, I've been listening to different people. Like I was listening to Howie Mandel on Rogan's podcast, and he was saying that he said, I got all kinds of stuff going on in my head, but he goes, working helps me stay away from the crazy in my head. Not the crazy, but like the issues, right? And a lot of us, I think, it made me reflect on myself. I go, wow, I work a lot too. Even when I'm in town, I make sure I get some sets in, because it's kind of what you just said. I love being around the comedy club, and if I'm not at the comedy club and I'm at home, I sometimes feel like, oh my God, what am I doing? But there's a couple of things to keep in mind. Number one is, so if you can take them with you, that's great, because now you're in a town and you're doing shows, and your wife will come one night and then she won't the next, and you'll have off nights, whatever it is. So there's that aspect. The other aspect is to actually book trips together. So like around Christmas a couple years ago, and we try to do this all the time. Like this past year, we went to Yosemite. A few years back, we went to Japan for 2 weeks. There's no comedy. It was just hanging out with the family. We went to Colombia for spring break just recently. Again, there was no comedy. It was just hanging out with the family. What are we doing for dinner tonight? What museum we're going to? Let's go hang out. It's just, so you make time to be together in that kind of a setting. And you realize that this whole fear of missing out, the FOMO, ain't all that, because you're going to end up in the end of your life going like, oh wow, I really didn't miss out on much, because it wasn't like you were going to be at one of these shows one night and all of a sudden Steven Spielberg was like, Steve, I've been looking for you and I found you at the Chuckle Hut in Idaho. No.
Right.
Just do your thing. And of course, listen, there's finances come into play, right? If you have to work to, provide, which we all do, that's a different thing. And then also you think in your mind, you're like, how can I start making more passive income? I just watched that Air Nike movie, which by the way, I thought was okay. I've read a lot about all that story and stuff.
I was excited to see Al Madrigal, and then he never came back.
Yeah, that must have been one of those, like, probably his part got cut
or something. Yeah, I go, ooh, Al's in it, and then I'm like,
me too.
Where's he coming back?
Yeah, I had that same thought.
To see that move that Michael made, and his
well, at the end, it said that Michael is estimated to make $400 million passive income off of the Nike shoes every year, and I was like, that's what I want. Yeah. Even if it's like $400, we need more passive income so that we have the luxury of not having to be on the road all the time, and also then not feel that heat. And then, by the way, where you are, I don't know how it is, but where I am in LA, at least, like, for example, this weekend I won't be on the road, but I'll be at the Comedy Store, Laugh Factory, and Improv, getting in 5-6 sets, 15, 20 minutes at a time. And it's one of those where I'll be like, hey, I got to go, leave the house around 7:00, come home late. And then, but I'm home. I'm not anywhere. So it's finding that balance, Steve, because it's like, you don't want to be on your deathbed thinking you didn't give it your all for yourself and for your career. But you also don't want to be on your deathbed going like, I missed all this amazing time that I could have spent. Like, one of the things that I've been trying to do, I'm not a morning person. I hate waking up in the morning. But when I'm home, I've been trying to, as much as I can, drive my daughter to school, because we get in the car, she plays her songs, we talk a little bit. Driving, it's amazing how much quality time you actually spend with your kids when you drive them.
Yeah, absolutely.
My son is now, as they approach teenage years, they will want less and less to do with you, which is actually natural. They should spend more time with their friends and become more independent. But my son recently, my wife had signed him up for some tennis tournament that was like an hour and a half outside of town. We got in the car, we started driving, we talked a little bit, we listened to some NPR, like there was a profile on some guy. It was really interesting. We got to the tennis tournament, and the guy goes, oh, no, today's the girls' division. Tomorrow's the guys' division. I was like, oh. And I wasn't that, like, upset about it. I told my son, I go, well, we kind of got to spend some time in the car and talk. That's great. Drove back. The next day, get up to go for the guys, and I look at the weather forecast, and it says it's going to be raining soon. So we called the tennis tournament, and we go, hey, we're about to drive an hour and a half. Is it on? And the guy goes, it's on. We drive an hour and a half. As soon as we get there, it starts raining. Canceled again. And I told my son, I go, well, buddy, 2 days in a row, we get to spend time together. We were in a car, but we spent time. We got 3 hours of quality time together in the car,
Well, man, Maz, I couldn't be happier that you reached out and your people reached out, because I'm a huge fan. And not only that, I think that we are very different in our stand-up, but we're also very alike. And I think my audience probably already crosses over with your audience, and they're absolutely going to fall in love with your stand-up, because you are one of those guys that when you walked on stage at the Comedy Store, man, I admired. I wanted to see your set. Your style of comedy is so down to earth, so real, so honest, and super excited. Where can they find the new special? And then for the new fans, this is beautiful, because they can go back and binge. Where can they find it all?
Well, listen, man, first of all, thank you for the kind words, and right back at you. I'm so happy to see your success, and it's always great because, like you said, we see each other's posters as we go into different clubs, and I'm always happy to see you as one of the guys doing really well, and proud of you for that. And the new special is called The Birds and the Bees. It's on YouTube. It's the first special I put on YouTube, so people can go watch it, give a comment, give a thumbs up, share it. As you know, there's a whole algorithm. I keep talking about this algorithm. I'm like, I'm like, just watch it, comment, whatever, and then let's get this algorithm going. But that's the new special. And then I've got specials on Netflix. I got specials on Peacock TV. I've got specials that people can find all over the place. And I'm at Maz Jobrani, MazJobrani, across the platforms on all the socials. So hopefully people can check it out.
By the way, those of you watching or listening, I know Maz said earlier that he cusses. Man, it is furthest from dirty or vulgar than you can imagine. I'm the same way. I always tell people my stand-up is strong language. It's not gross and it's not dirty.
Absolutely. No, I agree 100%. Like I never, when people hit me up, they go, can I bring my kids? I go, listen, I recommend it for 14 and older because I know that they've heard this language before, and then I'll leave it up to you. And some parents, especially immigrant parents, they'll bring like a 6-year-old, and I'll be like, what part of 14 and older do you not understand? And they're like, don't worry, I curse at him all the time. I'm like, okay. But like you said, it's not lewd. It's not like nasty. And as you know, people come see you live, come see me live. It's always a different experience because we're doing a lot of crowd work. We're talking to the audience. And so I encourage people, if they want to come see me live, then go to mazjobrani.com and see all the dates. And I'm constantly touring. So
where are you at next?
Well, I'm doing Denver the first weekend of June. And then I'm doing Calgary again in June. And then I go to Australia to do 4 cities in Australia. And then Auckland, New Zealand. And then I'm doing Hawaii. And then I'm going back into in the fall, I'll start, with Boston and LA and New York and all these other
cities.
So,
I might just be missing you in all those dates because I'm in Hawaii second week in July, 7, 8, 9.
So yeah, you're there a couple weeks before I get to the Blue Note, right? Is that where you're going?
Dude.
Yeah, we're doing the same. We're on the same circuit, bro.
Yeah, I'm telling you, man. So what I need you to do is I need you to hide something in the green room that I have to find.
Yeah.
And then when I look at your schedule and I'm somewhere before you, I'm going to hide some shit and make sure that not drugs or anything, something silly.
Yeah.
But man, Maz, it was great talking to you. And it's weird. I tell people all the time, they go, oh my God, do you know this comedian? I'll just use Joe Coy for an example. Oh my God, do you know Joe Coy? And I'm like, I spent 8 years of my life every single day with these people. Yes, I know them. So when we get to catch up like this, it's really cool. And it's also fun, as you know, man, when you see those guys on those posters, like you said, and go, oh man, look who's doing great, and I'm one of those people that you'll never hear me talk poorly about comedians in general, because I think we're all in a club, and it is very, very difficult to do what we do. And man, I think there's a comedian needed for everybody, every style, every genre,
Absolutely. And I've always said even though it's an individual sport, I think it's also an ensemble. Like their success is our success, because as your buddies move up, if there's a movie or there's a part or there's a project or whatever, they're calling each other up. Hey man, I need you to come do this. Hey, can you come do that? And it's fun. It's fun to be able to see others' success. And also, it's great when we get together and get a chance to perform on the same stage. So hopefully we'll cross paths one of these days soon and get a chance to catch up in person. But I appreciate you having me on, man.
And what's even trippier, I'll let you go right after this, but what's even trippier to me is all the different paths.
Yeah.
To see guys that we were doing comedy with, and all of a sudden you're like, what happened, man? Where'd you go? Oh, man, I'm a showrunner. Oh, wow, good for you, man. Or, it breaks my heart to hear that Al Madrigal quit doing stand-up. But amazing actor, and he's doing amazing things on the screen. So it's beautiful, man. And I wish you continued success, and congratulations on your life and your career and just being a good man. So I appreciate you, Maz.
Right back at you, and enjoy every moment with those kids. And don't worry about missing out on a weekend. It's Steven Spielberg ain't going to be there.
Yeah. Thank you, my friend.
All right, Steve. Take care.